At precisely 12:15 p.m., Samantha Reed sat alone in the corner of the staff break room, eating reheated pasta from a plastic container, her cleaning cart parked just outside the door. The Atwell Grand, a luxury hotel nestled in the heart of Manhattan, buzzed with the usual hum of elite guests and polished marble floors. Samantha had already cleaned 12 rooms by then suites, with sprawling views, bathrooms lined in stone, and linens that cost more than her weekly paycheck. But in that brief window of quiet, she allowed herself a sliver of escape. Her phone lit up with a message, Je hebt het gehaald. Bel me, alsjeblieft. Her heart skipped. It was from Professor van der Linde, her Dutch language mentor. With trembling hands, she tapped the call button and brought the phone to her ear, whispering in Dutch, "Did I really pass?" His joyful reply in their shared language rang through the receiver, and Samantha beamed, her voice soft but full of disbelief. She had officially achieved professional-level fluency in Dutch, a goal she'd chased for 5 years in silence and solitude. Unbeknownst to her, standing just outside the break room doorway, was Logan Bennett, the elusive CEO of Bennett International, whose quiet steps were rarely heard and whose presence, when it appeared, always caused a hush among the staff. Logan had come down from his suite for a last-minute investor call, but when he passed the break room, the sound of fluent Dutch caught his attention. Not just fluent, it was elegant, precise, with a warmth that only came from years of immersion. He paused just for a few seconds, listening not only to the words, but to the laughter that followed. In his world of suits, spreadsheets, and sharp negotiations, this felt real. He took note of her voice, her name tag glimpsed through the open door, Samantha Reed. Housekeeping. Without a word, he walked away, but something had shifted. A seed of curiosity had taken root. The next morning began like any other for Samantha. She punched in through the service entrance, tied her apron, and pushed her cart toward the 5th floor, where her assignment for the day awaited. But before she could reach the elevators, her supervisor flagged her down with a strange look. "HR wants to see you, now," she said flatly. Panic rose in Samantha's chest. Had someone complained? Had she done something wrong? She'd never even taken more than her allotted break time. She followed the long hallway toward the administrative wing, her steps heavy and uncertain. When she entered the HR office, she found Mrs. Lorraine Myers, the director, waiting behind her large oak desk files, stacked neatly at her side, and a faint smile playing on her lips. "Please sit," she said. Samantha sat. "I received an unusual request this morning," Mrs. Myers began, folding her hands. "Mr. Bennett has asked that you be reassigned. Effective immediately." Samantha's throat tightened. She'd heard stories of people being reassigned as code for being quietly let go. But before she could speak, Mrs. Myers continued, "You're being moved into a newly created position, Associate for International Guest Relations." Samantha blinked. I don't understand. "You'll assist with translation services, hospitality support, and cultural coordination, particularly with non-English speaking guests," the HR director explained. "Mr. Bennett believes your skills are underutilized where you are. This new role comes with a substantial pay raise." She paused. "Approximately 3 times your current salary." Samantha could barely comprehend what she was hearing. Her hands trembled in her lap. "Is this real?" she whispered. Mrs. Myers offered a small nod. "Very real. Mr. Bennett doesn't make impulsive decisions." Her voice softened. "You start this afternoon. He's requested to speak with you after lunch." When Samantha stepped out of the office, the hallway she'd walked down countless times no longer looked the same. The chandeliers sparkled a little brighter, the polished floors gleamed like something out of a dream, and the distant notes of piano music echoing through the lobby sounded almost cinematic. She wasn't just the girl behind the mop anymore. She was someone they'd noticed, and not just anyone he had noticed. Back in the break room, Samantha leaned against the wall, still trying to steady her breathing. Everything she'd buried, her education in linguistics, her passion for culture and language, her dreams of becoming a global liaison, suddenly resurfaced like a flower pushing through concrete. All those nights at the public library practicing Dutch conjugations, all those mornings repeating vocabulary on the subway had not been in vain. And though she didn't yet understand why Logan Bennett had chosen her or what he truly saw in that brief exchange, a door had opened. A real one, an unexpected one, and she had just stepped through it. By 2:00 p.m., she had traded her faded housekeeping uniform for a sleek navy blazer, fitted slacks, and a silver name badge that simply read, Samantha Reed, International Guest Relations. As she stood in front of the mirror, still unsure how she looked so different but felt so much the same, a voice inside her whispered, "This is what you were meant for. Maybe this is what you've always been meant for." And in that quiet moment, she allowed herself for the first time in years to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was about to change. Not because of luck, but because of who she had quietly, persistently become. Samantha Reed stood outside the glass-walled conference room on the 30th floor of the Atwell Grand, her heart pounding so loudly she feared the security guard beside her might hear it. Inside, a group of sharply dressed men was speaking rapid Dutch as they examined a thick portfolio of proposals for Bennett International's first expansion into Europe. Just 48 hours earlier, she had been cleaning the carpets in that very hallway. Now she was standing next to Logan Bennett, the founder and CEO of the company, dressed in a sleek navy suit that fit her perfectly every inch of her styled to match the elegance of the room she was about to walk into. Yet inside she still felt like the girl scrubbing floors in the dark. "You ready?" Logan asked, glancing at her with calm certainty. Samantha gave a small nod, swallowing hard. Ready or not, she was already here. The doors opened with a quiet hiss, and Samantha stepped into the room. The conversation slowed. The Dutch businessmen turned their heads curious. She introduced herself in fluent Dutch, clear, composed and confident even if her palms were sweating. Their eyes lit up with surprised respect. Immediately the atmosphere shifted. Tension that had been building from cultural misalignments and language hesitations began to dissolve. Samantha transitioned seamlessly between English and Dutch, translating not just words but intention, tone, and nuance. She softened rigid phrases, added warmth where needed, and helped both sides feel heard. At one point, a particularly complex question arose around real estate regulation in Amsterdam. Samantha calmly rephrased the issue and offered a culturally sensitive explanation that clarified the investor's concern before Logan even responded. One of the men smiled and leaned back in his chair, a signal of approval that didn't go unnoticed. As the meeting progressed, Samantha found herself moving with ease, almost instinctively navigating terms, personalities, and power dynamics with precision. Her voice was steady, her posture composed, and yet it never felt like performance. It felt like something truer, like this was who she had always been underneath the quiet years of survival. When the presentation ended, the Dutch delegates stood, shook hands, and exchanged pleasantries. Their smiles were genuine. One even thanked Samantha directly, saying her presence had made the difference. As they exited the room, Logan lingered. He looked at her, a small but undeniable grin forming at the edge of his mouth. "You saved that meeting," he said, his voice low. "That deal was about to slide off the rails. But you kept it together." Samantha, stunned, could only manage a quiet, "Thank you." But Logan wasn't finished. Back in his private office, away from the city noise and elevator dings, Logan poured 2 cups of coffee himself, no assistance, no interruptions. They sat across from each other on leather chairs, the skyline stretching wide behind them. "Let me be completely honest," he said, resting his elbows on his knees. "I didn't create that role for the hotel. I created it for you." Samantha blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "When I heard you speak Dutch that day, it wasn't just about the language. It was everything, the way you carried yourself, the warmth in your voice, the strength under the surface. It made me realize how much talent we overlook simply because we're not looking in the right places." His words landed like a thunderclap, both thrilling and terrifying. Samantha didn't know what to say. She looked down, fiddling with the edge of her blazer. All those nights at the Brooklyn Public Library, whispering grammar drills under her breath, all those years wondering if she was wasting her potential just to make ends meet. And now here was one of the most powerful men in the industry sitting across from her, telling her she had always been more than enough. "I don't know what to say," she finally whispered. Logan smiled gently. "Just say you'll keep going. We've got a long road ahead, and I want you at the table." Samantha met his eyes. There was no hidden agenda there, just a quiet truth that startled her more than flattery ever could. She nodded slowly. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, as she walked home under the city lights, Samantha replayed every moment from the meeting in her mind. The sounds of Dutch, the feel of Logan's gaze when she took control, the strange new confidence that had taken root in her chest. She stopped outside a small bookstore and caught her reflection in the window. She looked different, not because of the clothes or the setting, but because of what she was beginning to believe. That maybe her dreams hadn't died. Maybe they had just been waiting. She pulled her phone from her coat and texted her old language professor a single line. It finally happened. And beneath the noise of the street, the honks, the laughter, the rumble of the subway below, she heard something else. The quiet voice of her future whispering, "Keep going." It was nearly midnight when Logan Bennett sent the message. "I'd like to show you something. No pressure. Just a quiet place I go to think." Samantha stared at the screen, unsure how to interpret it. She had just returned home after another marathon day, filled with investor calls and strategy meetings, her role growing more demanding but also more fulfilling. She hesitated, then typed back a simple, "Okay." 20 minutes later, his car pulled up near the service entrance of the hotel. He was driving himself, no driver, no staff, wearing a casual button-down shirt and jeans, a quiet departure from the tailored suits she was used to seeing. She climbed into the passenger seat and tried to still her racing thoughts. Logan didn't say much during the short drive, only that he wanted to take her to a place few people knew existed. The rooftop garden sat atop a brownstone building on the edge of the city, far from the gleaming towers of Manhattan's corporate heart. There were no guards, no cameras, just a narrow staircase that led them into a hidden patch of green nestled beneath the stars. String lights hung between the brick walls, casting a soft glow over the vines and planters that framed the open space. In the corner, an old iron bench faced a view of the skyline. "I used to come here when I was starting out," Logan said, motioning for her to sit. "Before the hotels, before the suits and meetings. When I was cleaning bathrooms in Queens and dreaming about a life no one thought I deserved." Samantha turned to him surprised. He'd never spoken about his past before, not to her, not in public. "You cleaned hotels?" she asked gently. "4 years," he replied. "Graveyard shift. It paid for my night classes and enough cheap coffee to stay awake." The night deepened, and so did their conversation. Samantha found herself sharing things she hadn't spoken about in years, about her mother's illness, the way she held onto language as a way to feel powerful in a world that constantly made her feel small. Logan listened with quiet attention, not interrupting, not offering solutions, just being there. He spoke of his father, a maintenance man who never made more than $13 an hour, but whose work ethic shaped Logan's values more than any MBA ever could. "People see the company, the buildings, the deals," Logan said, "but they don't see the years I spent feeling invisible. I built Bennett International because I wanted to make spaces where people didn't have to beg to be seen." The words hit something deep in Samantha. She had spent so many years walking past luxury, never imagining she could belong to it. And here she was on a rooftop garden with the man who created it all, talking like they had known each other their whole lives. As the weeks passed, their professional bond began to transform. They were still sharp and focused in meetings, but in the quiet moments between strategy sessions and investor briefings, something else grew. An understanding, a comfort, a shared gravity that pulled them toward one another. There were late-night text exchanges about art and literature, quiet walks to the elevator after work, where neither wanted to be the first to say goodbye, and 1,000 subtle glances in rooms full of people where only they knew what was unspoken. Logan never crossed a line. There were no declarations, no inappropriate advances, but everything in the way he looked at her. The way he listened said, "I see you." And in that simple acknowledgement, Samantha found a kind of freedom she hadn't felt in years. One Friday evening, after a long day preparing for an international partnership deal, Logan asked if she'd like to join him for dinner. Not at the hotel, not with staff, just him cooking at home. She said yes before her mind could talk her out of it. His home surprised her. It wasn't the cold, modern fortress she imagined. Instead, it was a warm, lived-in space with books stacked on every surface and the faint scent of cedar and rosemary in the air. He made pasta from scratch sleeves, rolled up flour dusting the countertop. They talked about nothing and everything, about childhood dreams, about fear, about how success can feel lonelier than failure. There were no masks, no roles to play. Just Logan and Samantha, two people who had come from the margins and found their way into each other's orbit. By the time they moved to the porch, a soft rain was falling. Samantha hugged her knees to her chest as Logan sat beside her, their shoulders nearly touching, but not quite. "I don't know when it changed," he said quietly, "but I don't see you as just part of the team anymore. I see you as the one person I don't want to imagine this place without." The words hung between them raw and vulnerable. Samantha turned to face him, her voice low but certain. "This is real for me too," she said. "But I've worked hard to be respected. If people find out, they'll say I didn't earn this." Logan met her gaze. "Then let them talk," he said. "You and I will know the truth. That this started not with power, but with presence. Not with luck, but with trust." In that moment, with city lights blinking below and rain tapping gently on the roof, Samantha realized the line between colleague and companion had quietly dissolved, and she wasn't afraid of what came next. The headlines came faster than Samantha expected. Billionaire CEO appoints former hotel cleaner as strategic director. One outlet screamed. Others were more subtle, but no less biting, from housekeeping to the boardroom. A Cinderella story or corporate favoritism photos of her standing beside Logan Bennett at the Amsterdam expansion press conference spread across social media within hours. Comment sections buzzed with speculation, whispers turning into assumptions, and assumptions quickly becoming judgment. Despite the poise she had learned to wear in public, the sting was sharp. Every compliment suddenly felt loaded. Every glance, whether admiring or dismissive, carried a question behind it. Did she earn this? That night alone in her apartment, Samantha turned off her phone and stared out the window. She had fought too hard, sacrificed too much to have her worth reduced to a rumor, and yet the fear that it might all vanish because of how others perceived her weighed heavily on her chest. The following morning, she sat in Logan's office trying to hold herself together. She didn't need pity, and she wasn't asking for reassurance, but the air between them felt different now, thicker with the pressure of what the world had begun to say. "I don't want people to think I'm here because of you," she said softly, unable to meet his eyes. "I want them to see the work, the late nights, the years of study, the pain that got me here. Not just—" She trailed off. Logan, who had been standing near the window, walked over and sat down beside her, his expression calm but unreadable. "Samantha," he said gently, "you were already extraordinary, long before I ever noticed. I didn't lift you, I simply saw you. If people choose to ignore that, it's their blindness, not your failure." He paused, then added, "And if you choose to walk away to protect your name, I'll understand. But if you stay, I promise you this, no one will ever question your worth while I'm still breathing." Samantha looked at him, then really looked. Not as the CEO, not as the man who had once overheard her speaking Dutch in a staff lounge, but as the person who had consistently seen her, supported her, and challenged her without ever diminishing her. It would be so easy to let fear make the choice to retreat, to protect the fragile success she had finally built. But Samantha knew that playing small had never served her. What she had with Logan wasn't just a romance born in secrecy, it was a connection built on truth, transparency, and a rare kind of respect. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice steady. despite the trembling inside. Let them talk. I've earned every step of this path, and I'm not going to be ashamed of the truth that brought me here. In the weeks that followed, Samantha returned to her work with renewed intensity. Her title, Director of International Strategy, wasn't just for show. She led meetings with poise, restructured global workflows, and built bridges between departments across continents. Slowly, the noise quieted. Her performance spoke for itself. Colleagues who had once been skeptical began to recognize her brilliance. Investors requested her by name. And Logan. He never once tried to shield her. He stood beside her, never in front. He let her light shine without interruption, and that more than any promise or private moment solidified her confidence that this wasn't just real, it was right. There were moments of doubt, of course. Public life demanded sacrifice. Some days the judgment stung more than others. But when she looked in the mirror, Samantha saw not a woman in love with a powerful man, but a leader who had risen through fire and loss with her integrity intact. Her love for Logan didn't weaken her identity, it clarified it. Their bond wasn't a shortcut, it was a partnership. Built not on appearances, but on the long nights, the whispered fears, the shared burdens, and the unspoken knowing that they had both clawed their way up from nothing. One evening, after a successful investor dinner, they walked together down a quiet corridor of the hotel they once roamed separately, he as owner, she as cleaner. Logan reached for her hand and said, "You know, this place looks different when you're beside me." Samantha smiled. "That's because it is different. We made it different." And in that quiet moment, hand in hand, they both knew that their story was no fairy tale. It was something rarer, something real, a love that didn't rescue but revealed, a love not built to escape reality but to rise through it, together. 6 months later, the air in Amsterdam was crisp with possibility. Along the cobblestone path leading to the grand entrance of the newly constructed Bennett International Amsterdam, dozens of reporters gathered their cameras trained on the ornate double doors. Inside, the chandeliered lobby glowed with gold accents and modern Dutch elegance, a fusion of old-world charm and new-age ambition. Samantha Reed stood at the edge of the velvet-draped stage, the newest plaque on the wall bearing her name, Director of International Strategy. It was her third promotion in under a year. Her fingerprints were on every detail of this European expansion, from staff onboarding manuals in 6 languages to negotiations with Dutch city officials who respected her clarity, cultural fluency, and quiet strength. This was no longer just a job. It was a calling. She had gone from cleaning corners of luxury to helping architect it. And today, the world would finally see the full scope of her journey. As the opening ceremony began, Logan Bennett took to the podium, his presence commanding but less polished than usual, his tone more personal. He spoke of innovation, of growth, of shared values, but when he paused and glanced at Samantha in the front row, the room seemed to still. "Every company has milestones," he said. "New markets, record deals, cutting-edge projects. But every once in a while, a company has a moment that changes its very soul." His eyes met hers. "For us, that moment was when I overheard someone speaking Dutch in the break room, and that someone is now not only our Director of International Strategy, but also my business partner and the woman I'm building a future with." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was reverent. Then applause erupted. Flashbulbs lit the room like fireworks, but Samantha didn't hear any of it. Her heart was pounding with something too big for sound. In that moment, she remembered the cold linoleum floors of the Atwell Grand, the broken faucet in her tiny apartment, the library computers that shut down after 30 minutes, the Tupperware container of leftover rice and beans on the day she got the call that changed everything. She remembered the way she once whispered Dutch phrases on the subway rehearsing for a future she wasn't even sure she'd ever get to live. And most of all, she remembered the sound of her own voice, hesitant but hopeful, as she answered that call from her language mentor in the break room. That one moment, that single thread in the fabric of her life, had unraveled into a tapestry she never could have imagined. As the crowd thinned and media interviews wrapped up, Samantha stepped out onto the balcony of the hotel's presidential suite. The canals below reflected the amber glow of street lamps, boats drifting lazily beneath arched bridges. Logan joined her quietly, handing her a glass of wine. "You did it," he said, leaning on the rail beside her. She shook her head gently. "We did it." He smiled. "You're going to change how people think about leadership." But Samantha didn't respond right away. She was watching a young woman on the street below, helping an elderly tourist with a map, guiding her gently with gestures and a kind smile. "You know," she finally said when I first started learning, "Dutch people asked me why. They said it wasn't practical, but I wasn't doing it to be practical. I was doing it to not disappear." That night, back in their suite, Samantha stood before the mirror, not to admire herself, but to reflect on who she had become. The woman staring back wore more than a tailored blazer. She wore resilience, discipline, and a quiet, unshakable belief that had been tested by poverty, grief, invisibility, and doubt. She thought of her mother's photo, still taped to the inside of her notebook. "I'm doing it, Mom," she whispered. "And I'm still standing." It wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It wasn't even about proving herself right. It was about finally living the life she once only dared to imagine in the margins of late-night language notebooks. As dawn approached the hotel, quieted, Samantha stood on the rooftop garden Logan had once shown her, the same hidden space where their bond had first deepened. Now she stood not as a guest, but as an architect of the future. The breeze carried with it the scent of flowers from the planter boxes, and the first rays of sunlight began to warm the stone beneath her feet. She turned slowly, feeling Logan's arms wrap around her waist, grounding her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Samantha looked out over the city, her eyes bright. About everything it took to get here, and how one small moment, a single phone call, can change the shape of a life. She turned to him, her voice steady. "Not because someone gave me a chance, but because I was ready when it came." And with that they stood together, not at the end of a journey, but at the threshold of everything still to come. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that one moment of courage, one act of faith can change a life forever, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who's working quietly behind the scenes, someone chasing a dream others can't yet see. Subscribe to Deep Inside HQ for more stories of resilience, redemption, and the quiet power of everyday people stepping into extraordinary lives. Your next moment of inspiration might just be one video away.